This is GARIS, Masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 380, part 2, entitled To Female Masculists. Continuing straight on. So, what are women to do? Women have two main tasks in their lives. One is to sexually attract some man-slave, to pay for her, to have babies, to hunt for her, or in modern terms, to give her money. Nearly all women know that it's virtually impossible to be a committed full-time careerist and take care of infants at the same time. So most women want to find a man, to attract a man who will become her man-slave after she has fucked him enough times that the frontal lobes of his brain switch off each time he sees her, unconsciously associating the sight of her with pleasure hormones resulting from orgasms that she is responsible for. The other main task of a woman, of course, is to build and raise the next generation. So women need men. Women need to attract men, to seduce them, to sex regularly with them, so that men can be persuaded, brainwashed, to pay for women to have babies. So if women can't proposition men sexually the way men can women, due to women's 3 times lower strength across the chest than men, how do women attract men's attention, especially men's sexual attention? Question mark. Women do this passively with what the MGTOWs, that's men going their own way, that is, guys who refuse to marry, who reject paternity and spend their money on themselves, close bracket, call fake-up, that is, make-up that is designed to make women look more attractive to men than women really are, hence fake-up. I've often wondered about what I have always considered to be the childlike preoccupation of women for baubles, trinkets, sparkly things, diamonds, etc. Such gadgets, I suspect, are designed to catch men's eyes so that men look at the women who are wearing them, so that an initial emotional connection can be made between the man and the woman. For example, why do so many fat, rather ugly, sexually unattractive feminists dye their hair blue, pink, green, etc.? Anything that is non-natural. They do this to attract attention to themselves, especially attention from men, with whom women need to fuck regularly in order to make men man-slaves to women, to pay for women to have babies. I suspect that this need to attract men is so deep that it is probably mostly unconscious, that is evolved in the female brain to be interested in trinkets, sparkly things that attract men's visual attention. But back to how my girlfriend reacts to masculist ideas. She is humane about such things, I suppose for the same kind of reason that I can label myself a male feminist, in the sense that giving women equal rights and opportunities is simply giving women human rights that I would expect to be given myself, not only as a man, but as a human being. I want women to do the same for me, that is, give me as a male equal rights for men, equal obligations on men, etc. I can see that my girlfriend is a female masculist in the above sense. She readily agrees that the fluffy feminist control of the divorce courts, which financially crucify a quarter of fathers, is a moral abomination and has to be stopped. She sees the logic of why women have to vote with men for the men fairing of the gender laws, so that men are prepared to be fathers again. She has no problem with the idea that the greatest form of sexual discrimination is not against women, but against men, in the form of the non-existence of the para, that's paternity rejection right, with all its feminist hypocrisy, given that women have the mara, maternity rejection right. She is now well aware of the awful gender crimes that women committed against men, for example, paternity fraud, where the husband is not the father, against pill lying, that is, where the woman lies to her boyfriend/husband about taking the pill, gets pregnant, then expects the boyfriend/husband to pay for that kid that he does not want, in capitals, for decades, in capitals. A decades-long gender crime, so typical of women. She agrees with the logic that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, because she cannot fault the logic of the arguments coming from the Masculists. She agrees with all that, yet, as mentioned above, she is afraid of Masculists' anger, which, by the way, when the time comes, is a phenomenon that the Masculists can use to their benefit. Masculists can frighten women to vote with men to mend fair the gender laws, or pay a very heavy price. Young women are now panicking in ever greater numbers that they are not going to be given any sperm from the quality males they really want to mate with to satisfy their hypergamous instincts. As masculism spreads, as it must, in brackets, for example, I get hundreds of hits a day on BitChute alone to my Masculist videos/flyers, close brackets, then the girlfriends of these Masculists will be influenced by their boyfriends and become well-informed female Masculists. In time, the journalists will get into the act and reverse their gender-biased attitude that gender politics is a one-way street, that gender oppression is a one-way street perpetrated by men against women. As Masculist ideas spread throughout the culture, women will wake up to the idea that it's in their self-interest to become Biconscious, that is, to have both their feminist and their Masculist consciousnesses raised, so that they lose their monoconscious feminazi anger at men for the ways that men oppress women, and hence feel fully justified at expressing their feminist anger at men for the many ways that men have oppressed women. For example, resisting the right for women to vote, to enter the professions, to be given equal pay for equal work, against rape, domestic violence, etc. Masculists don't deny that men oppress women, but do deny that such gender oppression is a one-way street. In fact, Masculists argue that women oppress men far worse, since female oppression of men is, in capital letters, continuous, and lasts, in capital letters, decades. My female Masculist girlfriend understands all the above, so is Biconscious. She was an avid feminist in her early 20s and 30s, reading women such as Simone de Beauvoir, Germaine Greer, etc. But now, thanks to my influence, she has now become Biconscious, and so has had her feminist monoconscious anger more or less cancelled by a corresponding Masculist anger at women who oppress men, especially in the divorce courts, and with women's many gender crimes against men that have decades-long very negative repercussions on men's lives. Over time, as the number of Biconscious women increases, a tipping point will be reached in which there will be more Biconscious feminists than monoconscious feminists, and that dichotomy will probably split the feminist movement, with the Biconscious feminists agreeing with the Masculists that women oppress men too, so that monoconscious feminists, in the eyes of the Biconscious feminists, will appear as bigots, whereas the monoconscious feminists will see the Biconscious feminists as traitors, that is, as selling out to men, the enemy of the monoconscious feminists, who are to be fought against. The Biconscious feminists will preach to young women that if they want to be able to attract a man who is prepared to be a father, then millions of young women will need to vote with men to mend fair the gender laws. Otherwise, young men will only increasingly reject marriage and paternity, given how the fluffy feminist hypocrites have so taken over the divorce courts and made modern marriage so toxic for men that now 2/3 of young men, and probably within a decade over 90% of young men, will be refusing to give women their sperm, rejecting marriage and paternity, and preferring to go their own way by living the MGTOW lifestyle, which, by the way, in the short term of a generation or two, is the ultimate solution to the global warming problem, since far fewer people will result in less greenhouse gas emission, less polar ice cap melting, so fewer coastal cities will be drowned by rising sea levels. Biconscious feminists will be telling young women that by becoming Biconscious they will be happier and much more likely to get a boyfriend due to them being far less monoconscious, feminazi, bitchy. Young males, as masculist ideas spread, will expect young women to be biconscious. Otherwise, such monoconscious feminists will be considered by young men as unfuckable, rejectable, spit-uponable MFBs. That's monoconscious feminazi bigots. To be rejected and left to rot on the shelf, rejected by men and increasingly by society, as society becomes ever more biconscious. With this logic, monoconscious feminism will die out, and a good thing too, especially from a male, masculist point of view. I think a 2-12, 3-4 or 4-3 lifestyle will make whole populations much happier. Such relationships are based on equality, both in terms of rights and in terms of obligations. One of the main reasons why masculists have such a contempt of monoconscious feminazis in the divorce courts is that these women want equal rights for women in the parliaments, but reject equal obligations with men in sharing the burden of earning the living by bothering to get a career-competent education at high school and college, expecting unconsciously that some gullible man-slave will work for her, paying for her to have babies in a middle-class house that he pays for. Thus these fluffy feminists want their cake and to eat it too, which makes them hypocrites, wanting equal rights with men but rejecting equal obligations with men, making them female chauvinists, MFBs. Third wave monoconscious feminists want to achieve real power for women. For example, female presidents of countries, equal directorships of companies, etc. But at men's expense, not caring about the level of fairness expressed towards men, caring only about increasing women's power. And, as for men, well, they can go fuck themselves. Biconscious feminism will counter this kind of monoconscious feminazi bigotry and will fight against it, together with the masculists, aiming to create a happier society that biconsciousness brings. Young women will quickly learn, often the hard, painful way, that if they are not biconscious, if they are not female masculists, then they will pay a very heavy price of being forced to be manless, hence loveless, sexless, babyless, and spat at for being a monoconscious feminazi bitch, an MFB, that increasingly both sexes despise. Monoconscious feminism will die out, and nearly all women will have become female masculists. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man's Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 380 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website. Ciao.